Happy Monday, everybody. This is Attorney Bowers, your Cecil County, your Elkton accident and injury guy. This week, we are bringing back that concept that we had with the scams from a few months ago. We had to reschedule one of those. This week, we're going to talk about your loved ones, the aging population. Are they being targeted for scams? Are they being taken advantage of? And what can you do to educate and help avoid this from happening? That is this week's Monday Morning Lawyer. Good morning, everybody. This is your accident and injury attorney, Joe Bowers, here continuing this series. We had that little hiccup because of some scheduling stuff. We are going to finalize this last episode, and with me, I would love to welcome a colleague of mine, somebody I've known since all the way back in law school. She is an elder law attorney here. She does a lot of estate planning and things of that nature, and is here this week to talk to us about some common scams that target the aging population and might be targeting people you know. So without further ado, Margot Roberts, good morning.
Hi, how are you, Joeth? I'm so impressed with your little intro there.
We do what we can here. I mean, it's kind of, when you do something for a period of time, I think I've been doing this for about 4 months now, 4 or 5 months. It just kind of, it gets going and just becomes a thing. So let's get right to it. I want to talk about scams, and I want to talk about some stuff that you see in your world, because obviously you're dealing with folks that are approaching that target age for these as they're starting to think about their estate planning, and therefore they're interacting more with you. The pro tip, though, is obviously, I'm assuming, to start your estate planning even earlier, but we'll get into that maybe later. Talk to me about some of these things that are targeting the aging population that you see on a regular basis.
Yeah, so in preparation for today, I just wanted to get one statistic out there for you. From the FBI website, it said scams targeting individuals age 60 and older caused over $3.4 billion in losses in 2023. I mean, that's incredible.
In 1 year, and that's a
1 year.
reported number.
That's a reported number. That's exactly what was going to be my next point. I have said for years now, I think we are probably reporting no more than 20% of what's actually out there based on just my experience and talking to my clients and things that I've seen. I had no idea when I started in this field just how vulnerable the elderly are, and just how susceptible they are to scams and things like that. And then what I learned was we're not doing a whole lot to protect them.
No.
And which, is scary. It's a vulnerable population that is completely underserved. So I think two of the biggest ones that I've seen over the course of my career, and for some reason they don't seem to be going away. Like, I would think that like people would, get hip to these things, but they don't seem to be going away. And that's either the IRS is calling you because there's a problem, or it's the Social Security Administration. And I think that those two, pretending to be those two organizations, are so troubling for the elderly, because so many of the elderly, one, rely on their Social Security to live. So any call that seems to jeopardize that income, I think, is particularly troubling for them, and then puts them in a state of panic, which then makes them even more susceptible. And then the same thing with the IRS. Like, nobody wants to be in trouble with the IRS, right?
Right.
And so I think when they get these calls, which are becoming more sophisticated, by the way, I mean, that's the thing that's changing over time, is that the callers are becoming more sophisticated. They jump on the call. They have a ton more information than they used to have. So they seem very, very legitimate. But those are the two that are certainly the most common.
Yeah, and really they, from what I've observed, they take kind of this shotgun approach sometimes, where they're just mass calling any number that they can get. And obviously, that aging population is probably the intended target because they're more susceptible. And a lot of that just runs into the fact that technology today is so totally advanced compared to what it was 20, 30 years ago, that even for, do I call us middle-aged folks? Is that what we are? We're middle-aged folks here. There are things that have blown by us to be like, oh, wait, you can do that with that. And I mean, you can go so far now. These scammers have the ability to make that caller ID pop up saying and making it look like it is Social Security or the IRS or whatever they're trying to mask themselves as. And, despite the fact that those organizations, those administrations very clearly and blatantly say, we do not call you, we do not ask for certain types of information, when that phone rings and it says Agency X, you're kind of sucked in because it starts to, well, maybe they made an exception this time. No, they didn't make an exception this time.
Exactly it.
What do you tell people to kind of protect against this? I mean, other than folks like us doing things like this and hoping that more and more people see it, or maybe somebody's got some sort of a thought of, is this a scam? And then hopefully something like this pops up to be like, yes, these are signs that this is a scam. What are things that you try to do to help people avoid things like this, or their family members avoid things like this?
Sure. So what I really advise some of my elderly clients to do is just ask somebody else. Sometimes I think pride, or, especially in our elderly population, they've been through so much, they think they can do anything. But just ask someone that you trust. Unfortunately, I had even just a dear friend of mine get suckered into one of those. Remember when those alternate energy companies were coming around? Trying to get people to sign up. And, she fell for it. And she didn't ask anybody before she did it. And I spent time and got her out of it and just got her back with regular old BGE down here in Baltimore. But I think that's my number one advice. And when we talk about estate planning, right, we talk about two different documents that help you while you're still with us. And those are your financial power of attorney and your advanced medical directive. And I spend a lot of time talking to my clients about making sure that those people that you put in those agency positions are people that you trust. This is not someone that should be someone you don't talk to, or it would be a surprise to them to learn that they were put in this role. And then talk to them, work with them. There's no sense in waiting until there's an emergency to talk about what your situation looks like, so that someone can help you in the event that you get one of these calls and you're like, hey, does this seem right? And that person can be like, no. And as a matter of fact, you don't even have a bank account with, Bank of America anymore.
Yeah, and those are the things. Now those things, that type of stuff is coming via text message, and I would say, it comes in spurts, but every so often I just start getting text messages that say your account with XYZ bank has been compromised, or this has happened, and then there's a link for you to click. And what you have to understand, and this goes for everybody out there when these types of things come in there, is that you need to think about the ones that say that they're coming from the company that you bank with, the same way that you think about the random one that comes in from a bank you've never even heard of. All they're doing is taking this shotgun approach. I, the scammer, am going to take this text message with this phishing link where I'm going to try to steal your information, then do with it what I want. And I'm going to blast this out to 100,000 phone numbers. And out of those 100,000 phone numbers, 90,000 of them, and scale this to whatever number they're actually doing, 90,000 of those are going to be like, this is absolute BS. They're going to report it. They're going to delete it. They're going to whatever. And then of those remaining 10%, that 10,000 people, there's probably 1 or 2% of that remaining percent that are going to get them where they want to be, give them the information that they want. And that's all they're really looking for. I mean, they're probably looking to nab one person. If they get the right person with the right resources, it's worth it to have sent out those 100,000 texts or whatever the numbers might be. And, you know, they do this with text messages. They do this with emails. They do this with just random phone calls, pretending to be somebody. We were talking before we got started here about the bail bond situation.
Yeah. So that's one where unfortunately grandma or grandpa gets a call that grandson or granddaughter has landed themselves in jail, and they are purporting to be the bail bondsman that needs to be paid so that granddaughter or grandson can get out of jail. And I just had a client that this happened to, and he told me, he said, Margot, to be honest, like I was definitely falling for it. I believe this guy, well, unfortunately, I think he had a knucklehead grandson. So he was like, it kind of sounded like something that would have happened. And, but ultimately, he goes, you know what, let me call his dad first. And so he did. He called his son to make sure that his grandson was in fact not in jail, and this was a scam. But I can certainly imagine situations and think of situations where my clients don't have that close bond with the intermediaries. I can think of grandparents who raised their grandchildren, who there isn't maybe someone else they could call to double check. I know that one is working because I had read about it before my client had brought it to me, that it had actually happened to them. So I know that one is working.
And it's been working for a long, long time. This happened to my grandmother, received this call a long time ago while I was in law school. I remember what seemed at the time like out of the blue. I'm literally in the middle of class and I want to say, and again, this is a long time ago, so I don't remember everything, the order that it all happened in, but I ended up getting a message from my mother asking me if I was in jail. And I'm like, what the hell are you talking about? I am sitting in such and such a class right now in downtown Baltimore. What I later learned was, and you mentioned the fact that they call pretending to be a bail bonds person and, needing money because so-and-so is in jail or is in lockup. The call, from what I recall of this, was somebody called with a voice that must have sounded enough like mine to be like, hey, it's me. And that's all they said. They didn't say a name, but then they get that response that might even sometimes give them the name, and they take it, they go with it. And it's, hey, I'm locked up. I need bail money. I need $5,000, whatever the deal might be. And, I mentioned this with another one of these scam podcasts. So one of the things to look out for is how they're looking to receive this payment. It's never come down to the bail bondsman place on Main Street and give us $5,000 in cash. It's always, go get Target gift cards or go get Nordstrom gift cards. Like what court is taking your Walmart gift card? All right. And don't tell anybody that you're doing this. When they ask you why you're getting $5,000 worth of gift cards, just say they're for a gift or whatever. They're trying to make sure, as you said, talk to other people. They're trying to insulate against you talking to other people, because all it takes is somebody objectively to be like, you're doing what? Hold on, stop. Come over here. Is there somebody that we can call that that you trust, that can come in here and intercept this situation? Because nobody wants you to get scammed other than the scammer themselves. So yeah, I mean, a lot of those warnings. Now, as far as planning, let's get out of scam world. Let's talk about planning for what's next. Okay. What kind of things are kind of the baseline things that everybody should, and when I say everybody, I mean everybody. Because a lot of people think, oh, I'm not rich. I don't own a house. I this, I that. I don't need this stuff. Let's burst that bubble right here, and why everybody should have at least basic estate planning documents?
Happy to, and I have this conversation all the time. So when we talk about a basic estate plan, what we're talking about are 3 documents. 2 of those documents are operable while you're still with us. They're operable in the event of unavailability or incapacity or something like that. I go to myself a lot when I'm talking to clients. I had these documents in place, and thankfully, I was 27 years old, and I was going to have a treatment on, and I was going to be away for a bit of time. And as you know, at that time I was running my own practice, and so my father, who held my power of attorney, stepped in and was able to step in my role and make sure that the financial aspects of my business ran in the short time that I was unavailable. The other, times are, incapacity. So our elderly population starts to decline. We're seeing more and more cases of dementia and Alzheimer's. And so you're still with us, but maybe you're not making the best decisions. So we split those into 2 documents, and that one is the financial side, and one is the protection of the medical care. So you have 2 different people that could be making those decisions too. And I think that's really important, because sometimes that person that you would choose to make your medical decisions is not the same person
Right.
that you would choose to handle your finances if you're unavailable. Again, I go to meet all the time when talking to clients. As soon as I entered this field, I went to my parents and asked them the last time they had done their estate planning and if we could get it updated for them. Because I have 3 older brothers, and they're sometimes knuckleheads themselves. And but also on that medical side, I, had a firm conversation with my parents, and I said, listen, I don't want that role, because if a doctor came to me and said there was a 1% chance you were coming back to us, like, I'm not capable of doing that. So I need you to put one of those brothers in that position, because I need your wishes carried out as you want them. That 3rd document that we always talk about is your will, which is the document that governs after you're no longer with us. And it appoints someone to marshal your assets and then distribute them as the document says. And it can be really important. Even if you don't have a lot of assets, it can be really important, because a lot of times it includes things like what you want as far as your funeral. And then it can also include, especially for the younger folks, when I'm talking to them, your will is actually the only way to designate a guardian for minor children. And so when I'm talking to younger parents, that's sort of my talk to them. And most people think like, oh, well, we've named godparents. And I'm like, well, that's great. And I'm glad you had that. But actually, the only legal way to do it is to name it in your will.
Are there any other things, because obviously those types of things, and of course, stuffing things, everybody's thinking about, where's my stuff going to go? Where's my money going to go? What are the other things that most people don't think about that get designated? You mentioned, obviously, what my funeral is going to be. I'm assuming that will cover anything from bury me, cremate me, let me lay on the side of the road, whatever it might be. And some jokes in there. What are other things that, and obviously down to even like, hey, I want the flowers to be purple or whatever. What are other things that people don't commonly think about that get covered there?
As far as the end of life ceremony, or just in your will?
I mean,
in
outside of
general?
that, what are things that, I'm trying to get over this hurdle of, well, I don't have stuff, I don't have things, I don't own property. What are other things that come into play with a will that people might need to be aware of, but don't necessarily think about all the time?
I mean, the basic one that I tell people who don't have anything, usually they have a car. And where do you want it to go? Well, I don't know. Well, and maybe we need a will to designate a car. That's one thing that comes up all the time that people don't think about. The other thing that you kind of touched on was the stuff. And this is the same conversation I have with a lot of my clients on the stuff, because there is always something. There is always something. There is always great Aunt Helen's diamond ring, or a stamp collection, or a signed piece of memorabilia that's very important. There's always something that's very important to someone. Now, I could make a fortune if I let you put that in your will, because you're going to change your mind about who that ring goes to every few years, because we thought it was going to go to daughter, Susan, but Susan doesn't like it, or her future husband has bought her this beautiful ring and she doesn't need it. So what I do is I carve out what's called a gift memorandum, and it's referenced in the will. But it's something that you take home with you that you can edit and change over time, because otherwise you'll be calling me all the time to make edits of your will. And I guess that could be a good business, proposal, but it's just not the way that I run mine. I like my documents to last as long as possible. And as we think about that, we're talking about different people to serve as agents, and I like to build in alternatives and people who are, in a different generation too, so that these documents can last as long as possible once we have them put in place.
Awesome. Any last words before we get this thing going? I try to promise to my audience that I keep these things to about 20, 25 minutes, if not less, and we are definitely there. Anything else that anybody should be aware of? Obviously, they know that, like, with all of this stuff, feel free to reach out to my office. I'll get you in touch with Margot if you have any of these specific needs. Happy to pass that baton and make things happen there.
I think my last bit of advice is please just start having these conversations earlier than you think. If your mom is starting to show signs that she's failing, let's just sit down and have a conversation with mom. And it's going to be awkward for everybody, but it may help a lot in the long term.
Excellent. Yeah. I mean, especially down to those things of thrusting responsibilities on people that might not be incredibly comfortable with it. And if there are other options, finding that right person that, hey, I can handle this, I can deal with this. And then you're not leaving your family holding the bag on, oh, how are we going to handle this? Or, when it's done, you can't change it. So that person's stuck doing that role, even though somebody else might be more comfortable doing it. So, well, thank you so much on behalf of everybody watching this and everybody who will watch this. Thanks for providing this insight, providing this information. As always, if you have other questions, things that you want covered on a future episode, if it is accident and injury related, I'm going to talk about it. If it is not, and you've sent it there, I'm going to find somebody like Margot who knows what they're talking about, who deals with this stuff all day, every day, to come in and provide insight like what we have here. So until next Monday, everybody out there, be well, and we will see you soon.